Welcome to the Evangelisation Conference Ignite 2020 from the Dominicans, St Mary's, Pope's Quay in Cork.
So how are you? You're all very welcome to the, as Kevin said, back after the break, back after evening prayer. I'm joined in studio here by Father Alan Neville, a neighbour of ours here in St Mary's, based down in the MSCs on the Western Road. And the title of this panel is Evangelisation in Ireland, but we like to call it ground hurling evangelisation, because the people who will be coming on now in a moment to speak to us are all involved for many years, and they're still involved in getting things moving in Ireland with respect to evangelisation. Just a few books that we'd recommend if you're interested. If you're looking at some books that we'd encourage you to read if you're interested in evangelisation. One is The Benedict Option, which is a bestseller, New York bestseller. Another one is Forming Intentional Disciples, and this is from Sherry Waldell, an excellent book, and Sherry, please God, will be speaking soon in Ireland after lockdown is over. Rebuild, another excellent book, this is by Father Michael White, and Divine Renovation, which is by Father James Mallon, another fantastic book. Father James Mallon was over in Ireland a few times, and some of his compatriots as well have been in Ireland, and these books really give us hope in Ireland of what to do with regards to evangelisation. So Tony Foy, Tony is the national director of Net Ministries, and we've seen just a video there of Tony and your history with Net. I'm just wondering, Tony, if maybe we could just start off with a simple, well, not a simple question, looking at diagnosing the problem. The problem being is, how did we get here with respect of church attendances gone down in Ireland in the last 25 years from 80-90% down to just over 30%?
Hi, Father Morris. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Tony.
Great.
Can you see me? There you are. How are you doing?
Yeah. So just to repeat the question, how do we find ourselves here after church attendance of 80%? Now we're looking at 20%.
Yes.
I think that the question is very simple. The answer is probably quite complicated, but really simply there are a few main reasons in my opinion. And the first would be we've been just hit by a secular tsunami, and it's been let loose on us. Yeah. And the faith with which we grew up, so I'm now just gone 50 years of age, the faith with which I grew up was enough to sustain me into adulthood, whereas and that was a family faith. We didn't really question the faith. It was just something we did. We went to mass every Sunday, and that isn't enough anymore. That faith by osmosis isn't enough anymore. And it probably wasn't enough at the time to have a real deep faith, but it got me to adulthood, where I was able to make good choices and go to retreats and actually learn to love the Lord and get to know him and meet him personally. But we're losing our kids at Holy Communion for the most part, if we get them that far at this stage. So the culture has turned against, the wind has in effect turned against what we're about, and we're now sailing into the wind very much with a very strong gale force of a headwind, and we've got to learn to tack around it.
Same question. How did we get here? We're all similar age. Now I know you're younger than me, but we're similar age. So how did we get here? I know you have a Cork experience and I have a Dublin experience, but is it similar to what Tony's saying?
Yeah, I suppose in some measure it is. I mean, looking at the research, and certainly when you're working with young people, when you're speaking with them, their difficulty with the church maybe falls under three headings. That's how they would see it. They would see, first off, a premium and personal choice. So this notion of, what suits me, and this is my choice, and my choice is just as valid as everyone else's choice. They will also see, when you're speaking with young people, I did a sixth class session not so long ago, Grill the Priest, where you basically allow the young people to ask whatever questions they'd like to ask. And one of the key things that came up again was the church in relation to homosexuality and women in the church. That was a key issue for a lot of our young people. And then finally, it was the church and science. So faith and science being two polar opposites. Now, these are perceptions coming from the young people, and when we're dealing with them, this is where they are. And so when you talk about the Catholic Church, they automatically pigeonhole us into these things like the church is against this, this, and this, so we're not interested. And so I think we find ourselves where we are because we fail to communicate with consistency, with hope, and with joy what the church actually stands for.
Yes. Tim, thanks, Alan. Tim from the Tina Network. Are you with us, Tim?
I am indeed.
Tim, how are you keeping?
Good, thanks. Very well, thank you.
How's the weather in Mayo?
Oh, glorious. We'll send some more down to Cork if you want.
Tim, we have you to thank for bringing the likes of Father James Mallon to Ireland and others. The Tina Network, a lot of people in the Catholic circles will know about yourselves, but we'll come to that in a moment. Same question to yourself. To find an answer, we need to diagnose the problem. Where do you see us? How did we get here?
I think the thing that strikes me is that the world moved on quite fast, but the church didn't move with it. So, for example, as we're experiencing just even now, we're watching this conference on YouTube. So the means of communication, the flow of ideas has moved rapidly. And we were slow as the church to respond to that. I think also from the point of view of our culture, where from a typical parish point of view, going to church was what you did on a Sunday, the sense of community, which previously was the case, became less and less, the age profile and everything. So there was a factor there of people, whether they felt welcome in the context of parish, but also alongside that, there were so many other things that people could do and participate in, which maybe 30 years ago were not on the horizon. So we've become more part of a global world. And if anything, we as a church are catching up in response to that.
A minute to Pat. We have a little video to introduce Pat, but just to move a little bit on from that question, Tim, is in respect of how, now that we've, well, in a way, diagnosed the problem, what is the answer? Small question, I know.
Yeah.
I think just reflecting on the speakers that have spoken already in the conference, I think one of the things that our Holy Fathers over the years have emphasized is a real move towards personal commitment, personal conversion, a personal relationship with the Lord, okay, which is a language which for most Catholics and for most priests is a language that is very new, but it's very much the language of discipleship. What we have tended to do, and even in situations when I talk with priests, is evangelization is getting people back to Mass on Sunday. Whereas Pope Francis has talked about the whole aspect of inviting people to become disciples, to become missionary disciples, and to discover that they have a call on their lives, and that it's a journey to walk with the Lord, and that's what we need to do is a change of direction. So what we've tended to do is focus on catechesis, which is important, which is very much about discipleship, and we've lost sight of the fact that people need, first of all, to be invited to connect or to encounter the Lord Jesus. And when people do that, or introduced to that, they discover there's a meaning to the catechesis. There's a meaning to the life of the church. And that's a change of direction that we have to take place. But I think also, as a church nationally, we have to rediscover the vision, as Jesus put out there, that we are called to go and make disciples, to baptize and teach. And that's at the heart of who we are as a church. We are called to go out, whereas expectation has been people will come in.
Now I'm going to come back to that with you now, Tim. Sorry for putting across. We're going to come back to that question of, and just think about that for a minute, because we'll go to Pat now, and we'll have the video of Pat now, but just think about this question. That call from the Lord, we had it there, Father Brendan preached on that at Vespers there, that idea that that's where our call is, and we accept that call, but how is that realised in people's lives? I mean, how can we expect people with their busy lives to realise that? Sure. Okay, so but yeah, I mean, if you want to maybe I'll just pass it on to Alan. I mean, if you don't mind, Alan, just for a moment, we're just lining up Pat's video. But how do we realise that, do you think?
The call to discipleship.
The call to discipleship. I mean, is it fair to ask, like, or how does it look like for those looking in there, students, mothers, fathers, those working on building sites? How does that look? We don't expect them to be going to street corners and preaching the gospel, or do we?
Well, we had it mentioned yesterday that the most effective gospel that you'll preach is the gospel of your life. So I kind of wonder, as a people of faith, two things. How do we go out, and how do we invite people in? How do we go out? We don't. We do it very rarely, but when we do it, actually, the response is incredible. In Cork here, we've done several evenings of Night Fever, and for those of you who don't know, Saturday night, open up the church, St. Augustine's in Cork, the community there, incredibly welcoming. Go out into the streets of Cork. We send out teams of young people, and they invite people in, and there's the Blessed Sacrament, and there's music ministry, and there's reconciliation. Powerful, and you can see the moment of encounter happening. Where we fall down is our next step, because we do all these incredible programs. They come into the church, we have a fantastic program, they do the program, and next thing, nothing. Yes. Even if you look at studies around RCIA, the amount of people who drop off from the Catholic Church following RCIA is incredible when we consider the amount of work we put into people journeying with them, and then afterwards we fail to maybe engage with them on a deeper level. Same thing with sacramental preparation, First Holy Communion and confirmation. Yeah. All the work we put into them, afterwards, the results, nothing, because we've nothing in place that addresses their needs in particular. Yeah. So I think we need to look at how we reach out, and I think something like Night Fever, great, but certainly not enough. And also then when we invite people in, what are we inviting them into? Is it something that meets their needs, and is it also something that challenges them, enthuses them, and makes them into disciples?
Well, it's an excellent lead in now to Pat. Thanks, Father Alan, from Holy Family Mission, because that's exactly what they're doing in Holy Family Mission, is that they're bringing young people in and making intentional disciples out of them. So we'll just watch this short video with Father Pat.
Hi, my name is Father Patrick Hall, and I'm Spiritual Director here in Holy Family Mission, where we have been opening our doors for the last 5 years to young people from all around the country and indeed across the globe who have a desire to discover an ever deeper relationship with the Lord. Maybe they've had some sort of an experience where they see they've been on a pilgrimage, or they've had some good faith experience at a retreat, and then they want something more, they want something deeper. So here we facilitate that, and not only introduce them to the Lord, who He is and how He is, but what He has called them to. All of us, each one of us has a missionary calling. We're called to be disciples and to disciple others. So that's what we do here in Holy Family Mission. So I'm part of Ignite 2020, hosted by the Dominicans in St. Mary's in County Cork. So I'm delighted to be part of that. Father Mike Schmitz, Sister Miriam James, Scott Hahn, Ralph Martin, amongst others. So if you want to be part of that, sign up at Eventbrite, and looking forward to seeing you there. God bless. Bye now.
Hello, my name is Father Alan Neville, and I'm a missionary of the Sacred Heart.
Great now.
So from that video, in the background, we could see Holy Family Mission. We're discussing, we've moved on a little bit from diagnosing the problem now to looking at the answers. And Father Alan mentioned there about this idea that, and you're familiar with night fever. So the idea of going out, bringing people in, what do we do then? And Holy Family Mission are answering that in a big way.
Yeah, like something that myself, Maura and Pat have all experienced in various aspects of youth ministry is that you can put on a wonderful event, right? A pilgrimage, a weekend event, a youth thousand retreat or something. And then afterwards, the young people invariably ask, what now? What can I do now? You know, I mean, it was an amazing week. It was an amazing weekend. Where to now? Where can I go for more of this? And sometimes it's quite saddening to say, well, your parish, that's where you live. But they say, but there's nothing going on there. And with all due respect, like to parish priests and curates and for all the work they're doing. But when it comes to faith formation, it's not something we have had to do in this country, or at least it wasn't as considered as necessary as it evidently is today. I think that when going back to the question that was asked before about people petering away from the church after the sacraments, I think very often when people have rejected the faith, what they have rejected isn't actually the Catholic faith in the first place. I remember seeing a video years ago on YouTube. There was a group of comedians, and they were imitating One Direction's "The Story of My Life," right? So they were singing along with it and singing along horrifically, but it was hilarious, you know. Now, if that's the only video of One Direction I saw, I would say One Direction are useless. What on earth is all this hype about? Yeah. And I would reject not actually One Direction, but what I thought they were. So I think what people have rejected, or many people have rejected about the church, isn't actually the church at all. They haven't necessarily rejected church teachings, because while they might know the bottom line, they definitely do not know the why. While they might know some of our rules, they don't know the Lord behind it. You know, I think it's very rare for someone who has met Jesus to reject the faith. You know, so I think that's what we try to do here in Holy Family, is to introduce them not just to the catechesis and the formation. The catechism is important, but most important is that they get to know who Jesus is as a person. And then regardless of what happens afterwards, regardless of the knowledge or the lack thereof, that relationship with Jesus is what's going to hold them strong through thick and thin afterwards. So it's like a greenhouse, you know. You don't put someone in it, you don't have plants in a greenhouse to keep them there forever. You plant them there, you get them strong, and then you send them out. So this is what we aim to do here in Holy Family.
So what we're taking from this, Father Pat, is that Father Pat is a fan of One Direction, is that it?
Absolutely not.
Thanks, Father Pat. We might go back to Tony. Tony, thanks, Father Pat, many of you will know Net Ministries, and myself and Father Alan, the Dominicans and the MSCs, we combined to bring Net Ministries to Cork. I mean, Net Ministries are around 20 years now, not in Ireland, but they're near enough to 20 years in Ireland, are they? But that ministry is very much, there's formation and then there's sending out, yeah?
Yeah. So Net Ministry started 40 years ago, and it's around the world: USA, Canada, Australia, Uganda, Scotland, and Ireland. And it's been in Ireland for the last 16 years. But yeah, absolutely. Like, we have young people want to do Net in Ireland, both Irish people and people from abroad. And you know, the first 2 weeks of their preparation for their year of mission is retreat. So in terms of making sure that their relationship with the Lord is one in good standing. So they understand who he is, they understand who they are in light of him, etc., etc. And they know him personally, and they want to spend time with him in that year. And if you know, that's really the cornerstone on which Net is built, is that if you want to, for want of a better way of putting it, that's where the real magic happens, where the Lord actually gets a chance through that 2-week period to come into a young person's life, and it's real and it's very powerful, and lives are changed every year in that situation. And then we start to build them with the tools that they need to actually go on mission. So 6 weeks altogether of formation, and then we send them out. We put them into teams, and we put them into parishes then around the country.
And so, I mean, just for those who don't know, Tony, before the lockdown, how many teams were in Ireland?
So we had 8 teams of missionaries working in Ireland, about 50 missionaries rough and tumble, and then another 20 staff in Donegal supporting them. And so they would go out and visit the teams and make sure what they were doing was good and appropriate, and what the priests that we were working with wanted, all that type of thing. And so we've come a long way. We've come from a stage where 8 years ago we couldn't find the work in Ireland. So that's how we set up Net Scotland. The church in Scotland wanted us. And so we set up the ministry there. And now we've got to the stage where the demand up to COVID-19 has been so strong that, we've now got 8 teams working in Ireland. And please God, we will again and more besides. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Thanks, Tony. Father Alan, is youth peer-to-peer ministry, is building up youth ministry the key to evangelization, or is there a need to evangelize all age groups?
I think something like youth ministry, what you need to look at there is, youth ministry for me is about stage 5 or 6. I think we need to actually go the whole way back. We need to look at, how do we welcome families into our parish? Do we merely tolerate them and have a crying room tucked away in the corner with a series of books and toys that are covered in phlegm and God knows what else? And we sort of think, go in there because we love families, aren't you great? Or do we journey with our families? And do we support our children, not just sacramentally, but do we have a parent and toddler group? Do we have a children's liturgy, First Holy Communion? Is there a youth group? Is there something for confirmation? Is there something afterwards? And if we can support them the whole way along, in each step they're being disciples, A child in a playground who turns around and tells someone else, stop, throwing stuff around or stop bullying him, that's discipleship. I think we're at the stage where we want someone who's 20 years of age looking for God and kind of think, well, snatch them. That's not how it works. It needs to be fostered within the family and within the parish, but it needs to take resources and energy and insight and vision on our part. And we need to be behind it. We need to have a parish that says, families, you're really welcome. Let's work together. Let's see how we can all grow.
Yeah, thanks, Father Alan. Tim, can I bring you back in there? Because as I mentioned earlier, we have yourself and the China Network to thank for bringing James Mallon and Divine Renovation. And I have to say, it was Father Alan who introduced me to both books, the Rebuild book I showed earlier from Father Michael White, and then the Divine Renovation book from Father James Mallon. And what it did for me personally as a priest, it gave me hope that here you had priests in parishes who renewed their parishes in a very systematic way. And I mean, all you have to do at home is read chapter 5 of Divine Renovation, and Father James Mallon would tell you the same. The rest is nice but ancillary, but chapter 5 is the key, and that chapter gives really people the tools. For those who are listening at home in parishes and in priests or lay ministers or that, people involved in ministry. So we'd like to just talk a little bit about that, the how. Yeah.
Okay. Just to say that was a combined thing with Alpha. I know you had Dominic on earlier in the conference. So it was a partnership between ourselves as the China Network, which is a network of Catholic ministries, with Alpha. I think one of the things that is really important, and you highlighted there, is to have a vision for your parish. What Pope Francis has been putting forward is a vision for the church, for the future. This is the way forward. And what we have tended to do in parish is it's the same thing every week, whereas the vision of Rebuild and also of Father James Mallon is talking about a vision which encapsulates everybody in the parish. So there is a vision. How do we bring people who are not members of the parish in? Do we have, as part of that vision, how do we equip them to grow as disciples? And then also as part of that vision, how do we equip them to go out? And as was highlighted over the conference, to go out and evangelize the culture, to go out and evangelize the workplace, to go out and evangelize the schools and beyond. And it's really, one of the things he talks about there is, for us as lay people, our expectation when it comes to evangelization is that the priest does everything. It's his job. It's the religious's job to do the evangelization. Whereas the nature of discipleship is that we are all called to be disciples. And so what Rebuilt as a book and as a ministry does, and what Divine Renovation does, is set out, how do you develop a vision for your parish? How do you put together a team to make that vision come to pass, working with the parish priest? The parish priest is still the leader, but instead of him being responsible for everything, he gathers around him a team of lay people, and obviously if there's religious in the parish as well, to develop a vision, a sense of the parish going in a direction. And at the heart of it has to be a church, a parish that reaches out. One of the pictures I love that St. John Paul II talked about with regard to parishes is that they should be a school of discipleship. It's a place of, it's not a place of attendance, it's a place of learning and growth. And so everybody who comes into that parish should be discovering that they have a call, the call to follow Jesus. Secondly, that they have a call to whatever state that might be, married or single or religious. And also a third part, which is a call, what is God calling me today to do today? And, you know, we talked a little bit about the sacraments of communion and of confirmation. We receive them in order to be equipped and be empowered for the mission of the church. That's a big part of what's been missing for so many of our young people, is for them to feel part of the mission of the church.
Thanks, Tim. I mean, just going on what you say there about lay collaboration, and in that book, in Divine Renovation, and we might go to Father Pat about this, because he mentions that clearly, that when he announces from the altar he wants people to get involved, the first thing they put up their hands for, and God bless them, is for extraordinary minister of Holy Communion or to be a lector, not to be an evangelist, you know. And that's down below. Here's a clear example of a priest, along with, you know, Pat and Moira, etc., building or fostering young disciples to be what their baptismal call is, you know, to go out and preach that gospel. Exactly.
What we aim to do here, you see, if people know the Lord, if they really know his heart for them, like if, you know, young people, youth ministry is messy. Anyone who's working with young people, especially these days, it's messy. There are family problems, there are addiction problems, there are past wounds, memories, hurts, all sorts of stuff. And so it all comes up often in the silence of adoration, the silence of their time in front of the Lord. So you have to walk with people through that. Now, as people get to know the Lord, they learn to love him, because they see that despite all that mess inside them, the Lord looks at them with such love, such compassion, you know, and wants to lift them up and make them into the most beautiful, the best version of themselves. And he walks with them every day. And this lived relationship then with him, I think then they discover this faith is actually life-giving, right? It's not just a list of rules, but it's something that has actually set me free. I have experienced the love of Jesus in my heart. I have experienced the healing power of Jesus in my heart. And then they begin to discover basically that we have like an ice cream stall on Ballybunion Beach any year but 2012 or 2020, yeah. Right? But what we have is so desirable. What we have, it's like it satisfies all of our needs. Like God suffices. Jesus is enough, and that gives them the courage to actually witness to him. If they've never really met him, there's no way they could witness to him. There's no way that they would on social media say, lads, check out Ignite 2020, or, you know, vote pro-life or whatever it may be, because they know the onslaught that they're going to take. So when they know the Lord, though, it's this relationship with Jesus Christ that makes them into missionaries.
And that's that word there you say, Father Pat, the whole idea of a relationship with Christ is something that is out of our language, you know. Tony, I believe you want to come in. You have something to say on this.
Yeah.
Father Pat.
Yeah, thanks, Father Morris and Father Pat. They're like, we'll get to the practicals, because it's very, you know, later on in this conversation, because you know, we all need practicals, you know, to how to do this. But in terms of the impetus for doing it, I think we really need to know that in our hearts. And like Tim and Father Pat and Father Alan have been talking about that. But there's one person in the church that actually is allowed to preach to the Pope, and he's been preaching to 3 popes so far. He's still alive. His name is Father Raniero Cantalamesta. He's a Capuchin Franciscan friar. And he says there have been 4 waves of evangelization in the history, the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church. The first wave was apostolic, so where the apostles brought the faith that was given to them by Jesus. They walked along with Jesus, and they built the church one person at a time. and they walked with people and they built communities. The second wave of evangelization, and Ireland is a really good example of that, is the monastic wave of evangelization, where towns or rural centres, for want of a better way of putting it, were built around monasteries, and the faith was passed on by the monks. And, we have Clonmacnoise, you have Lismore, there are many great examples of that in Ireland. And so that's the second wave of evangelization. The third wave of evangelization was the clerical wave of evangelization, where priests and monks and nuns brought the faith around the world, And you talked about St. Benedict, where Ireland saved European civilization. It was Irish monks who brought the faith back to Europe after the sack of Rome or whatever. And he says we are now currently living through the fourth wave of evangelization. And I have to be really careful as a layperson when I say this, because it's not a mutually exclusive thing. It is very much both the clerics, our brother priests and our nuns, and the lay people. And he says the fourth wave of evangelization is the lay wave of evangelization. And a lot of us in Ireland, particularly, find it really difficult to get our heads around what that actually means, because we don't have a visual or an experience of that. But those of us who have practiced our faith, myself and Sheena lived in America. We've traveled all around the world. Ireland is actually quite unusual. The church here is really struggling. Now, we're coming up from the dip, but there are many countries where the faith is actually thriving. Africa, the faith is thriving. Asia, the faith is thriving. North America, the faith is actually thriving in a lot of places. They have their struggles, but boy, I wish we had their struggles, frankly. And so we have to travel. The impetus is on us. We are, our qualification is our baptism. Our impetus is, Matthew, go and make disciples of all nations. And we just need to do this, and we'll talk about obviously that. What does do this actually mean?
Thanks, Tony. We'll bring in Father Pat in a second. I know you want to come in, Father. We'll just go to Father Alan for a second, because you're a missionary order, so you have that experience of many different experience of church. Mm-hmm. So your experience out there, what Tony's mentioned there about in other countries. I know you're going off on mission very soon in autumn, please God. So what would the difference be, or what can we learn from other countries?
I suppose, my experience is, worked in the Philippines, worked in South Africa, worked in Venezuela, did a little bit of work in North America and the UK. I suppose two things. One is the church is very much involved where the people are. So I think when I'm in some of the mission countries now in the Global South, wherever you find where there's real challenge and real difficulty, you're going to find a sister, brother, priest, or lay person right in the middle of things, doing their very best. Maybe they could do it better, who knows, but they're there and the people see them and they recognize here's someone who's with us. And what's really interesting, for example, in Venezuela at the moment, so many different groups have pulled out of Venezuela. The country's really struggling. The religious, they're still there. And the people know this, they see it and they respect it. So one thing is about the presence of sisters, brothers, lay people, priests, everybody, and they're working together. The other thing I think when you look to countries like North America and the UK, they will esteem something like youth ministry. So we have a parish, for example, in Texas. That parish has 3 full-time youth workers. That's not extraordinary. It's not a big parish. It's not an especially wealthy parish. But they have 3 youth workers who are there, who are employed full-time. And they work with other youth workers in the area. Where we struggle in Ireland, I think, is we're still very much involved where we're needed, but our work is so low-key, and we don't like to talk about it. And I understand it. I really do get that. But we do need to be able to kind of get out there and say, this is who we are, this is what we do. But the other thing then is we need to look at, are we working together? Because we're not. Yeah. It's really interesting. Right around this country, whether it's different dioceses, different groups, or different religious congregations, there's amazing things happening, and we're not sharing best practice. We're looking for, I need a program to work with young people aged 14 to 18, We go off and we try and reinvent the wheel. Someone else has it, but either we don't ask them or else they won't share. That time has now gone.
Yes.
We need to be working together, and we need to be working prophetically.
Absolutely. And we'll come a bit to your work as secretary with the with the group that tries to unify that. Father Pat, you have, you wish to say something on the topic?
Yeah, two short points, which may become three. I'll try to keep it to two briefly.
That's okay, yeah.
One thing which I think has really hurt us in the past in the church here in Ireland is minimalism, where whether it be priest or laity, like we ask ourselves, what's the absolute minimum I have to do either to get to heaven, or what's the minimum I have to do to be Catholic? And generally when I ask in parishes, when I used to do parish missions, what do you have to do to be Catholic? They say, well, Sunday Mass. And that's it. That's kind of box ticked. Now, if you do nothing faith related for the rest of the week, you're grand because you've that box ticked. So we've kind of forgotten that our faith should actually animate every aspect of our life. So how I dress, how I drink, programs I watch, how I socialize, everything I do is actually affected by my relationship with Jesus. Now, this doesn't make us a cult or anything. We still live out there in the world. But then back to what we were saying earlier about lay ministry. When you ask the question, as a layperson, do you want to get involved in the church? They say, oh no, I as you said earlier, I couldn't read, or I couldn't do a prayer of the faithful. And I said, to be honest, I've got the readings and the prayers of the faithful under control. It's everything else out there is lay ministry. Politics is lay ministry, schools, lay ministry, factory floors, lay ministry, pubs, lay ministry. Everything else except the sanctuary is lay ministry. So there's so much to do and so many openings. And if we have this absolute fire that Jesus Christ is enough, we can maybe we will be talking later about strategies, but if we don't have the roots right first, every strategy is going to fail. If I don't have a love for the Lord, no matter what I do, no matter what my strategy is, if soldiers aren't trained, no matter how good your strategy is, it's going to fail. Yeah, absolutely. And just on merging those 2 points, Father Alan, yourself, just go back to Tim. I mean, Tim, just respect, thanks Father Pat. With regard to the name of Father James Mallon's book, I think is very poignant or very insightful, From Maintenance to Mission. Myself and Father Alan talk about this a lot, about where we spend our money. And the mention there of, Father James Mallon's very strong on this. Father Alan was mentioned there.
Absolutely.
Three full-time youth ministers in a parish in Texas. Texas. And in Ireland, we don't seem to have caught up with that idea.
We haven't caught, and part of it is, again, this whole thing of the priest doing everything. Also, we have, if you go to any typical parish website, I can say it because I'm involved already with the parish website, what we show is the building. And a major part of our investment, even today, is in buildings. And one of our challenges with this lockdown is the church finances are going through the floor because people are not going to church. Okay, but it's in the nature of things, people invest in buildings. And unless we switch that around and say we need to invest in people, and it doesn't mean necessarily that we actually have to hire everybody. What it means is this, is that in any typical parish, you have rows and rows of professionally qualified people. You have accountants, you have secretaries, you have project managers, you have professional businessmen, you have carpenters, electricians who are skilled, but quite literally when they walk through the parish door, all their gifts and abilities suddenly fall off them and they become like spectators. And it's a real challenge for us, I think, for us at the present time, is that there has to be a total reorientation, which is highlighted very much by Father James Mallon when he talks about we're in a maintenance mode, which is how do we hold on to what we have? And the reality is it's like sand flowing through our hands or water. It's going to flow away unless we do something to change the way we relate to our people. And that involves saying, okay, we have wonderful people who come in. How do I release them into the vocation of the laity? And that's one of the powerful things, for example, with this conference. What you have done is you brought lay people on and religious working together with lay people setting up ministries, reaching out to people. And that has to be seen as multiplied. And we need to see that in our parishes, that ministries are multiplied, the ministry of hospitality, reaching out to people who are grieving, reaching out in counseling, project management, reaching out in evangelization, looking at, for example, Alpha, or a program we also use, it's Discovering Christ, or you have NUA, which is a wonderful program. We actually don't have to reinvent the wheel with new programs. There are loads of programs out there. We just need to release people and give them, to empower them, which is part of their gift. You know, we don't unqualify as Catholics because we have a degree. We are qualified because we are baptized and we are confirmed. And that's what we have been afraid to release lay people into, is to say, you have a calling on your life, you have been equipped with charisms, go ahead and do it. And obviously we need to cover for mistakes, and we have had mistakes. But that's where, you know, in this situation, we have to take risks. Absolutely. Else we will die. And as we do have dioceses dying around the world.
Absolutely. And just, I mean, so let's look, I mean, Father Pat mentioned there, we only have 15 minutes left, so let's go to practicalities. We've touched on the practicalities, and we'll stay with yourself, Tim, on this just for a second, because Sherry Waddell is very strong on this with her book on intentional discipleship, you know, in the sense of forming intentional disciples. And she says some shocking things when, and this what I think moved her to write the book, or moved her to change her ministry towards this idea of intentional discipleship, is when she realized that a lot of people in the pews, as you've mentioned, don't realize that that is their call, not to be spectators, but to go out and be those intentional disciples. So at home now, looking in, there's people that are on fire and want to do stuff, but they feel alone. There could be parish priests, there could be laity, you know, whoever is there is listening in now. They want to start by rebuilding their parish, or rebuilding the religious house, or whatever, wherever they are. Looking at that, intentional discipleship, James Mallon, rebuild, give us one practical step of what they could do immediately.
I think in every parish, you'll find a very small minority who have a sense in our hearts there's something more that we're missing here. There's something that in some way they've been touched. And I think one of the roles of the parish priest is to identify those and to bring them together and share vision and share ideas. I think that would be the first thing. The second thing is, the point you're raising is that we have loads and loads of people in the parish who are sitting in the pews who've not been evangelized.
Yes.
And so it may be a situation, as I know you're doing in your parish, that you run programs like Alpha or Discovering Christ, where people are presented with a presentation of the gospel and given the opportunity to ask questions and process. But then beyond that, it's saying, okay, if they respond, it's actually saying, would you like to help run Alpha in the future? We need to be thinking in terms of not simply, we tend to run programs and then the programs die. And it has been highlighted by Father Allen and others. It's thinking in terms of, after this program is finished and hopefully people respond, how will we release these people to get involved in the life of the church? I think one of the assumptions that we have is that people know the answers to our questions. Our problem in the present culture is this, and I've seen it working with young people, is that they have forgotten or they've not been presented with the questions of life. Programs like Alpha offer those questions like, what's the meaning of life? Why am I here? Is this all there is? Where does God fit into this? We need to ask those questions. But it's thinking in terms of how do we move from a maintenance mode to actually moving that large body of people to activity. It's just a very quick summary.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Father Allen, on that idea of moving from maintenance to mission, again, same question. People looking in, wondering what to do. How do they start? One practical step of how you would encourage them to invest money in youth ministry, invest money in leadership programs?
I'd start at the beginning.
Okay.
What we did in one of our parishes in the UK was we set up a parent and toddler group. Excellent. And we had a lot of families who weren't connected with the parish. And it was very simple. Well, the parish priest said, Alan, we need to set up a parent and toddler group, which he meant, Alan, you need to set up the parent and toddler group, of which I knew nothing.
Yes.
No, but it's a very steep learning curve.
Yeah.
And that grew as a community. And I think those are the small things that when people come to church, they need to be part of something where people, they notice when they're there and they miss them when they're gone. And it starts with these kind of small groups. And what you do is you journey with these people. This is something that it's going to take a little bit of time, but that's okay because it's worth the investment. But we really do need to look at supporting, journeying with families as we go over time. For example, just maybe jumping the gun slightly, but like in the UK, all of our sacramental preparation in the parish.
Absolutely.
And we're working with the families in the parish, and we're working, for me, working with the kids, they're a gift, they're brilliant. But we've got 20 parents to 25 parents working with 7 kids on small tables for a year. Those 7 kids ask the toughest questions that you could possibly imagine. Like, what do you mean Jesus is bread? This makes no sense. And the parents actually have to stop and they've got to think. And at the end of that year, you've got 25 parents who have had the toughest examiners, who are keyed in and on fire for their faith. And then we're able to bring them in and engage them with other activities in the parish. So it's very much like we've been hearing so far. We need to release the gifts and talents that we have in our parish. Like Tony said, you know, we need to look at, this is an age of evangelization of laity and clerics and religious all working together. But we need to take that step. We need to move beyond being stuck into old ways of being and old ways of doing things, and have the courage to look and say, you know, it's working here. What's stopping us from trying that? Or it's working there. What's stopping us from trying that here?
Absolutely. And courage, and as you say, not reinvent. We just look at other programs, how they're working. Thanks for that, Alan. Tony, have you got any thoughts on practical steps? Somebody looking at home. How, I know you're going to say get a net team in. That was
get a net team, but after.
That's it.
Once you've got a net team in.
That's it.
So I would say, and people mightn't expect me to say this, but so I'll speak to the lay people out there, okay? I'm not going to speak to the priests or the religious, okay? I'll speak to the lay people first. The first thing is get to know who Jesus is. You know, if you're not praying, start praying, okay? And if you're praying, pray some more. And, you know, we've had so much, you know, Father Mike gave a great talk on prayer. Like, really, we've got to give the Lord time before we give the Lord to anybody else, you know? And, you know, go on retreats, do whatever. But first of all, pray. That is the most important thing. The second thing I would say is focus on our vocation. For me, I'm a married man. I'm blessed to be in ministry. It's a very unusual position that I'm actually in. This is what I do for a full-time job. My vocation is, number one, to love God first, okay? My second vocation is to love Sheena, love my wife. That's what I do second. Third thing I do is to love my kids. And this is in terms of evangelization. If I cock that up, if I make a balls of that, doesn't matter what I'm doing outside. And excuse my French, okay? If I make a mess of that, it doesn't matter how good the parish is. Doesn't matter how many people I lead to Jesus. If I mess that up, and so my third thing is the children, my kids. I've really got to focus on that. And then fourth is net ministries. You know what I do in terms of my work and et cetera, et cetera. The third thing I would say, and this is crucially important, and this is especially, you know, in terms of how we evangelize, we've got to build a community. Our parish should be a community. If it is not a community, why would people bother? So the GAA is a wonderful organization. They're much better at building community than we are as parishes. If we can't do what they do and make people feel welcome, if we're just the same, you know, it's an activity we do on Sunday. They do an activity on Sunday. If we don't make people feel welcome, and Father James Mallon talks about this in Divine Renovation, if we don't do that well and really well and love them with the love of Jesus that we've been talking about in prayer, then we're doing something wrong. Number 4 is we have, you know, how do you spell evangelization? Tim talked about it. Risk. You're going to get a kick in the head, you know, bottom line. And so be up for that, but it is going to, you know, we've got to do this, and that is belong to a tribe and do things like Alpha, Youth 2000, support, get behind, do things. Where I'm talking about the young people in peace, you know, have that conversation at the end of a phone call. Say, God bless. You know, that might just, you never know. Why you tell me God bless? You know, what do you mean God bless? You know, when you pay for something in the shop, God bless. You know, and the last thing I would say is victory is assured. We just have to engage in battle. Pick up your stick and start fighting.
God bless you, Tony. Thanks a million. And Pat, you want to come in there on this point?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we know why we want to do this. Why do we want to get stuck into ministry in the first place? It's because we're part of this club and we want it to succeed or do well. No, we want people to know Jesus. Why? So that they can get to heaven. So like the stakes are so high in this. We want them to know the Lord. We want them to get to heaven. So this isn't an optional extra in their lives. So as both have said earlier, that there isn't always an element of risk in this. And not everything we do is going to go well. Not everything we do is going to succeed. But James Mallon, in his book, Renovation, he speaks about investing heavily in the couples that came to have a child baptized, for example. So he had a whole preparation course for them. And then after that, there was a introduction to the parish, then preparation for the actual baptism itself. So winning them back one family at a time. And he said out of 50 families, out of 50 baptisms that he would do, only about 10% would continue to practice regularly. But he said that's 10% more than none, right? And so then every year in his parish, 5 new families. In 2 years, that's 10. In 5 years, that's 25 families that weren't practicing before.
Yes.
So like our faith is relational. The Trinity itself is relational. If we're not in a relationship, if people don't know we care, if people don't know we love, they will not attend our church. But also on top of that, and maybe more importantly, for myself as a priest, if people don't think I know the Lord, they will never come to me as a priest. You know? So if they can see that we have this treasure, that we live it, that it sets us on fire, then it makes them interested. But then we have to be willing to invest in the few. So if I were a parish priest, I know the 6 or 7 families that attend regularly. I would invest in them. Invite them to different things, get to know their kids, start a youth group. So work with the willing. It's not just about releasing people, if you will, with their gifts and talents. If their gifts and talents aren't going to be Christ-centered, they're going to wreak havoc in your parish, because they'll have all of their wonderful ideas, which unfortunately can build up things for their own glory. Our plans through our power for our glory, as opposed to the Lord's plans to the Lord's grace, the Lord's glory. So if it's Christ-centered community, relationship built into this Christ-centered community, then I think we'll begin to see renewal.
Thanks for that, Pat. For Alan, we only have 3 minutes left, so just briefly going back, it's a strong point coming forward here. We need to take risks. We need to spend a few pound. Huge part of it is the development with families, investing in people. It's going to take effort, building up leadership teams, and making disciples. Yeah. So, is the future looking bright?
I'd be hopeful, but I'd be pragmatic. It's interesting, when I walked past here today, I walked past the church I used to attend as a child with my grandmother, and it's now closed. And it's the first church I've come across in Cork that has been closed. And every single time I walk by it, I remember as a child going in there, and they had the statues of the saints, and they had all these weapons. It was the instruments of their martyrdom or whatever. I thought they were like action figures. I loved it. And as I walk by that church, I still have an ache within my heart. But I was just thinking, in the course of this conversation, I was thinking, in some ways, is that closed church, as difficult as it is for me to see, a sign of hope? Because we've let go of a building, and we said, okay, we've let go of this, but what are we going to take on now? Are we going to actually do something with the energy we've let go, not looking after the structure? And it will still pain me every time I walk by. I think as a church in Ireland, we're still in the upper room. We've been in the upper room for a while. There's been, a few people have kind of maybe put their foot outside the door. Yes. They're kind of checking out what they think. And I think where we find stuff, this is Pentecost. This is the time when the Holy Spirit is coming in, and he's blowing the doors off the hinges and the latches off the windows. And he's kind of saying, okay, now is the time.
Yes.
This for me is the point that we will look back on in 10, 20, and 30 years' time and say, either this was the time when we took the risk and it worked, or this was the time we allowed ourselves to be killed by caution. And so I would hope, looking back, that I can say we had the courage, we had the faith, we had the compassion, and we had the vision to allow the Holy Spirit to move us. This is our Pentecost time.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect final word to finish on. Thanks, Father Alan. Father Pat, thanks a million. Tony, thanks a million. Tim, thanks a million. I think next time we'll look for about 3 hours, you know what I mean? And that would only get us
Absolutely.
But fantastic, and thanks for taking the time out. Just again, those books, and the one I think we'd all agree on is Divine Renovation, Father James Mallon. If you haven't read it, buy it online and read chapter 5. And if you want to transform your parish, it's a great way to start.